Okay, here's a thought experiment for you. What if Christianity and Islam? What if they aren't two totally separate paths, but actually, two steps on the very same spiritual journey? It's a pretty wild idea, right? Well, today, we're going to dig into a really unique framework from our source document that argues exactly that.
So yeah, that's the big question we're tackling here. Are they really just two different stages of one path? It's a bold claim for sure. So let's jump right in and see how the source material actually breaks this whole thing down.
All right, so this quote right here, this is pretty much the central idea of the whole thing. It says, Christianity is a precondition to become Islam. Now hold on, before you jump to conclusions, to even begin to understand this, we have to kind of hit pause on our usual definitions of these religions. We've got to look at how this specific source redefines them from the ground up.
So where does this journey even start? Well, according to this framework, it all kicks off by facing a problem that it says affects every single one of us, something it calls our false identity. This is the starting line for everything else we're going to talk about.
So what exactly is this false self? The source says it's basically an identity that isn't really ours. Think about it. It's been programmed into us from the outside, by society, our families, all these systems. It shows up in our mortal, physical nature, and it's all governed by what the text calls a false program.
And get this, the framework gives a name to the force that keeps this whole false world running. It calls it the authority of devil. Okay, so what in the world does it mean by that?
Well, it's not defined as, a person or a being. It's described as an unseen false program. It's almost like the hidden operating system of our physical world that keeps that false self chugging along. And that's the system that needs to be overcome. So the big question is, how do you even start to do that?
And that brings us to the very first step. In this framework, the process it calls Christianity is framed as a kind of spiritual demolition. Yeah, you heard that right. It's about actively tearing down that false identity we were just talking about.
Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. The source reinterprets crucifixion, and it also uses the word fructification, not as a one-time historical event, but as a deeply personal, internal spiritual process. It's your active demolition of that programmed false self, tearing down everything that keeps you tethered to just this mortal world.
Okay, so that's the obvious next question, isn't it? If this whole thing is a spiritual process, what does it actually look like? What are the steps to this demolition? The source lays out a pretty clear three-step path to what it calls rebirth. First up is baptism, which it sees as cleansing that false program from the mortal world. Then comes step 2, the awakening. This is where a spark of light, which the text actually calls Christ, starts to shine from inside you. And all of that leads to step 3, rebirth. This is the moment you become what the source calls the first immortal being.
And this is absolutely crucial. The framework really hammers home this idea of personal responsibility. It's not something that's done for you, it's a spiritual job that every single person has to do for themselves. You have to crucify your own false self.
Okay, so if all that demolition is the journey, then where are we going? What's the destination? Well, according to this framework, the end of the line, the goal, is reaching a state of being it calls Islam. And here's that new definition I was talking about. The text defines Islam not as a religion in the way we typically think of it, but as a state of consciousness. It's about the perfect alignment of your true awakened self with what it calls divine consciousness. It's all about harmonization.
So what's it like to be in that state? It's described as this total harmonization between the Creator and creation, a state of deep, profound peace. It means you become an immortal being, living as what the text calls an eternal being in heaven.
All right, let's start putting the pieces together. We've got the prerequisite, the demolition phase, and we've got the final goal, the state of peace. So, how do they really connect?
This really simplifies it for us. In this framework, Christianity is the process. It's the hard work, the active demolition of the false self. And Islam is the resulting state. It's the peace and harmony you get after that work is finished. One is the journey, and the other is the destination.
And this table just lays it all out, side by side. For the foundational event, you have crucifixion on one side and harmonization on the other. For the spiritual function, you've got demolition versus alignment and peace. And that brings it all home to the relationship. One is the precondition, and the other is the resulting state. Simple as that.
And just like that, we're right back where we started, looking at that central quote again. But now that we've unpacked all these terms like false identity, crucifixion, and the state of Islam, this sentence has a whole new meaning, right? The demolition process is the necessary first step to get to that state of peace.
So, this all leaves us with a bigger question, one that goes beyond just this one framework. What happens when we take ideas we think we know and just look at them from a totally different angle? Can reframing these familiar concepts lead to some new, maybe even surprising understandings? It's definitely something to chew on. Thanks for joining me.